going to be crazy. You got people, make them feel terrible, and this is serving God. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. Amen. He wants you to be a decent person. Now that's not easy. That is talking not easy. That's hard. It's very hard indeed. A person wants to do what they want to do, regardless of how much it hurts somebody else. Anybody that lives in, for a person to be an extremist, so that's what you should do to somebody else. In other words, this is the way it's supposed to be. Now, mercy is such a wonderful thing. I'll give everything I have and give it all away. Extreme is exactly opposite of the Torah.
That you go and destroy other people by your learning of Torah, then your learning of Torah has very little value indeed. Say, for instance, the Gemara talks about what is a foolish, saintly person. There's a person, a saintly person. The Gemara says it is not permissible for a man to look at a naked woman because she might be aroused, might do something that's not proper. So what if a man's walking along the beach and there is a naked woman drowning? You think he can swim, she can't swim. He says, I can't look. I understand that, but that's exactly what the Torah says you're not supposed to do. And the same thing is that people want to go and excuse their fanaticism and claim that this is what God wants you to do. And that's exactly what God does not want you to do. If you're going to be Meshuggah, that's your Meshuggahs. That's not God's Meshuggahs. You understand that? This must be a fundamental principle. Even in the areas where it's very meritorious. Who says that learning Torah is not a very important thing? If there's anything I've ever taught you, I've taught you that learning Torah is the biggest mitzvah. God forbid. Oh, yes. Say, for instance, a person is in danger of life. It's my time, I got to learn Torah. Now, the Gemara gives an example of a person giving charity. Was one of the greatest Jews that ever lived. You heard this? He had a big unit, and he was a tremendous person. And the Gemara talks of, and he would always say, this is also for good. Anything that happened, this is also for good. That was his way. He always believed that everything that God made happen, this was for good. One time, Nachman Zamtu was traveling along the road, and he had a donkey loaded with food. That was his food, and he was traveling along the road. He met a poor Jew that came to him and says, Rabbi, I haven't eaten several days. I'm starving. Give me something to eat. The rabbi says, just as soon as I unload, I'll be glad to feed you. When he was unloading, the man dropped dead in front of him. Now, it wasn't that the rabbi didn't want to feed him, but that little moment that he delayed in feeding that man, this was a question here of you're rising to the time you're supposed to arise in emergency. You are defeating the purpose of Torah. So Gamzu immediately understood the ramifications of what he had not done. So he immediately cursed himself. You hear this? He says, the eyes that did not have mercy on this person should be blind. Don't delay it, because that can sometimes, the timing can delay the whole thing. And he said that God should make him a basket case, because his hands did not move fast enough, or his feet did not move fast enough. And then he became that. This verse became true because God listens to a righteous type, and he was in the righteous type. And his students couldn't stand it. He says, Rabbi, this is terrible. He says, I am begging of God that God let this happen to me, because if he didn't, God forbid, would have lost my portion. God said that this is what occurred in the story.
And that's the only way.
And he felt that the only way that God would ever forgive, I know what you said, haughtiness has no place in the presence of Almighty God. Nobody's permitted to be haughty in God's presence, since God is everywhere, such thing as permissible for haughty. So, and the Gemara talks that we learn in other places that it's improper, and it's certainly not a proper thing for, it would be advisable to be more balanced, so to speak. But this is only a temporary matter. The person happens to have a great, more than usual, towards that type of a sin that he wants to be, especially if a person gets a lot of money, and it's just very hard for them to leave. They get very snotty and
they talk to people, or they talk down to people to make them feel horrible. They don't talk like ordinary people talk. That's what the Rambam says. If you have a propensity in it by nature, you may be a excitable type, you get angry very fast. You got to work on it and try to go. The goal is the moderate path, the medium. This is the goal that the Torah is telling us to aim for. An extreme is an extreme. Even if it may be an extreme with the best intention in the world, although there is a mimer that says that one person was very happy that he had gone to an extreme where he got such so humble and everything that the Rambam of such a case where he took contempt why even the sailors, and one of them relieved himself on them, any aggravation in relation to that. But this is an extreme thing, and it's not something that the fact is, it is
anger. In order that it shouldn't be done again.
It depends on the circumstances. If you can have some kind of a person, you can do it. Yes, but you've got to be very careful in that direction. It's not what the body needs. You're supposed to eat in moderation, which is a improper thing to do. You're not supposed to eat so much. It's perfectly all right to open your mouth to learn Torah, but this is not easy to do because we are as human beings. We have such tendencies. We just shoot off the moderation all the time. It's very seldom good.
Yeah. If somebody has done too
Moderate. You can't live with extreme. For instance, God forbid should not happen. A person that has high blood pressure. You can't always have high blood pressure because sooner or later something's going to break. And the same thing. No, whatever it is, it's got to be done in a way that, and the whole thing, the whole procedure, all to be an activity of moderation so that you can, as soon as you go, you are defeating the purpose of God. God set it up in such a way that everything has an order. And this order is being disrupted if you go to an extreme, contrary to the ways of God. The ways of God are beautiful. Rabbi, people who are a decent person, and you're nice to everybody, and you're nice to yourself, you're not a... Both that is the way that very few people follow. Be honest with yourself, and you have to work on it. You have to work on it. Sometimes some people they got a trigger temper, or some people they have a tongue. Lashon hara, Lo Shema comes out of their mouth all the time. They're saying something. They're knocking somebody. They just couldn't. Every time they talk, they destroy. And they talk in such a. You got to understand what you're doing. And if you don't do it, don't make the assumption and don't blame God that you're doing something terrible. You're doing it to yourself. Nobody's doing it except yourself. So the Rambam says this is the way to come to the path of God. Now that's not easy. And don't make that assumption. And if a person can be a moderate and be a decent person, it's a beautiful thing. And this is the way of God. A moderate. God is telling us that this is the way you should live. And it's right. He's right. It's exactly right. If you live according to that, you'll live the longest. You won't get too excited. You won't kill yourself with high blood pressure. Some people get so excited and everything, they kill themselves. They have a heart attack before they live out their life. Other things happen, or there's so many ways in which you can mess yourself up, and it's not necessary. The whole thing is not necessary.
And somebody goes to the, I don't understand.
Learning Torah.
I can see somebody saying, learning, you're supposed to always be...
Wait. Donna, first of all, I am not talking about learning Torah. Learning Torah is teaching you the guidelines so that you can do these things in a proper way. If you don't learn, there's no way in the world that somebody is given this knowledge by instinct. You have to sit and you have to learn. You got to put the effort. Nobody's going to do it for you. If you don't put in the time and you don't put in the effort, you'll be always a knockschlepper. Somebody else will have to tell you what to do, and sometimes they know what they should tell you, and sometimes, God forbid, they don't even know what to tell you. And they may mislead you. So rather than you doing it, you're doing it wrong because you intend to do it, but they didn't know enough to tell you the right way, which is another thing. When you are dependent on somebody else for your knowledge, when you have to depend on somebody else's call, you make enough mistakes yourself, but the cholila chas that you have to go and live your life depending on somebody else's reasoning. If you kind of live in a way that somebody else has got to think out for you, zachan to your mouth, because a lot of times they make mistakes. They don't understand the situation, and sometimes they analyze it
only to their limitations. And God forbid they have sometimes limitations. People are that way. You have to become knowledgeable yourself. You have to be able to stand on your 2 feet. You have to be able to have a pipeline directly to God's Torah. You've got to be able to learn it inside and understand what it's saying and what the guidelines are. Once you're in that position, then you're on your way. Nobody's going to go mislead you. Nobody's going to draw you a cup. Nobody's going to say this is what you should do. All you can say that you're going to do, and it says specifically in the Torah, that's not what you're supposed to do. Once you are on that way and you persistently remain competent to get in that way, you are headed for and you're not headed in the other direction. But if God forbid you have to depend on others, and God forbid the others that you're depending on are not God-fearing and they're misleading you, they're pushing you in the wrong direction.
I can understand somebody can be crazy, somebody can misunderstand, or they won't probably just that. We shouldn't say this goes for there is no little.
You have to learn an awful lot before you get to the point where you can go, be able. We've learned already that in order to get to the point that you can learn on the level that you have to learn for at least 40 years. Yeah, I understand. See, thanks God, I've already learned more than 40 years on the yeshiva level. And I can already decide a question of halacha. I can go into the sources and I can find out what our tradition tells us, and I can tell you exactly what is the proper thing to do. Now you got to get to that degree of competence in order not to be misled by people that either intentionally mislead you, God forbid, or unintentionally because of knowledge. They don't know themselves. It's the blind leading the blind. Again, if the lawyer is not competent, his mazel. The lawyer can mess up his case too. And I see that every day. I go to court, I see lawyers, they mess up one case after another. They're based Rahmanis. The guy would have been better off not to hire the lawyer in the first place. I've seen that. I go to court every day. I see lawyers mess up case after case. It's just shocking. Go and explain that. The lawyer is messing it up. There's no way people won't understand that. It takes a lot of things. When you first start practicing law, I'm a lawyer. First start practicing law, you make a lot of mistakes. You learn from these mistakes. You learn from these mistakes, and pretty soon you know what to avoid. I had a case a few years ago, I told you, where there was a young lawyer for the insurance company. He had a case he should have won. There's no way in which he should have lost that case. And I didn't see him at all. But the poor guy couldn't even prove up his case, according to the laws of evidence. It was pathetic the way I tore his case apart. And the judge was going over trying to help the young lawyer. There was no question in the world he should have won it. And I didn't do anything unfair. Just follow. He could not do the job. He was not competent. And you have many spiritual leaders also. Fortunately, there's nothing unusual. You deal with human beings. They should work in business. Now you see, there are a lot of people who spend all their lives amassing money after money after money. I can understand that you have to provide for your old age in time of emergency. But a person comes to hundreds of millions of dollars, even if, God forbid, he didn't work for the next 150 years. He couldn't spend that money under any circumstances in any way whatsoever. And they're still working and they're still going, willing and billing like it was something that, again, without any measure at all. When this happens, this is a person has lost full sight of what life is about. What good will it do after 120 years that he has earned 100? Help him in the world to come. The only thing that can help him in the world to come, our tradition tells us, is Torah and good deeds. That's the only thing that will help you in the world to come. That's what you should do. Unfortunately, people live in such a way that what is important they don't do, and what's not important, that's what they do. So the whole thing is pathetic. It's a really pathetic thing. You don't need enemies. You're your own worst enemy. It's a shred of Chazal. Go further. Again, within measure. The Torah doesn't say you give all your money away. 10% is a proper amount. 20% up to the limit, absolute limit. You give more than that, you are violating a command. Here it is. Yeah. It shows you that yourself in your desire to show them you're very good. Oh, this guy is only giving 10%. I'll give all 100%. That doesn't prove anything.
That's a rebuttal based on his statement that you should love your neighbor more than yourself,
Yeah.
that's considering you love your neighbor 51%, and you love yourself 49%. So you're loving him more than yourself. So if you make money, you make $100, you give $51 away to anybody, to anything. You keep 49. That would show you if you did such a thing, you're going against the Torah.
It's not
So
the way
that
to do it.
he should know why.
This is, I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying
You
it.
know how much you love yourself. Same amount. You should love everybody else. No less.
Well, we say you should love your neighbor like that if you hate yourself. And it's talking about a general rule. You're supposed to treat others as a reasonable person. To say the whole world's premature. That doesn't mean that either. We're talking about a reasonable type. All right, let's go further.
Then she got it.
Money is
A rule is good. Give charity as much as you are obligated to neighbor. Loan money as much as you can. That you can do. The person should be happy, but not too happy.
And there was a wedding. As a result, they were getting real. So one great rabbi took a very expensive vase and would make something on there that people shouldn't have unbridled joy at the wedding.
He could take his hand. Neither should he be too sad.
All right, there's the other extreme.
Can't be
unhappy. Every place he goes, he's unhappy. He's just Mr. Gloom. Every place he goes. That's not the way to live either.
No.
That's not the way to live either.
Appearance.
Now look, a person should be happy. Why? Because it says in the Torah, you should serve God with joy. And you should trust that God will make everything work out if you're doing what you're supposed to. If God forbid you're doing something wrong, then obviously you're asking for it. But if you're doing the proper thing, then you should trust that God will provide. And that is the way to live. That's the way of God.
The same with the other attributes. What does that mean? I don't know.
Any other thing that you have, for instance, if a person has a tendency to be a miser, then he has to go and work on it to be more charitable. If a person is too charitable, he's got to work on it to control his spending.
Whoever goes in the middle way is a chacham, that's wise, and that is okay.
Yeah.
And that is good and the righteous path.
Here it is. This is the Rambam. He's the chief rabbi of Egypt. First of all, you got to be honest with your own self-analysis. Don't make the assumption that, fortunately, you're not exactly.
We also learn from this commandment, just as God is called gracious, so should we be. Just as God is called merciful, so should we be. Just as God is called holy, so are we.
Somebody once in a while doing something that's nice, but most of the time doing something nice, that's not it. Holy means that a person is consistent, avoiding doing things that are bad, and consistent in doing things that are proper. Now, certain discipline that many people, unfortunately, are not. But this is what the Torah requires us to aspire to.
The same with the other authorities, attributes of God. That's correct. Controlling one's anger, abundant kindness, showing abundant righteousness, wholeheartedness, we should try to achieve to the best of our ability.
See, it's just because once in a while you manage in a crisis situation to keep your mouth shut at the right time. You don't say what you shouldn't have said. The next time you got around, next time you might shoot off your... So this isn't that easy. It's a very difficult commandment to continue successful. Your life is beautiful. Not only your life is beautiful, everybody around you is blessed because you...
How should a person accustom himself to go in the middle path? He should always find the middle way and repeat this way until he is accustomed to it, and it will be easier for him to do it.
Complicated. You know, some people think in order to be a real righteous type in the eyes of God, you got to go and do something. You just got to keep it up.
And you don't come 9:30 or 10. But you wait a minute, excuse me. There are exceptions. Certain people have certain exceptions to the rule. But I'm trying to indicate to you the middle path, the right path, is to be there from the time that they start the davening. Not when they've been davening for 10 minutes or for a half hour or an hour that you come late, and not that you come early. Early is like the extreme.
Not only to serve God, so therefore it is quite proper indeed to come. He's asking you to do what it. Yeah. If you're engaged in one mitzvah, you're free of that. Yeah. obviously we have a general rule. If you're engaged in one mitzvah, he's asking you to do within your limitations. But if you are engaged in meritorious things, obviously we have a general rule. If you're engaged in various things, obviously we have a general rule. If you're engaged in various things, obviously we have a general rule. If you're engaged in various things, obviously we have a general rule. If he's asking you to do within, he's asking you to do within, he's asking you to do within meritorious things, obviously we have a general rule. If you're engaged in one mitzvah, obviously we have a general rule. If you're engaged in one mitzvah, you're